International Jewish Film Festival Committee. We are celebrating 35 years now of bringing our community quality Jewish-themed films. And we're now in our first foray into the virtual. We are extending beyond Buffalo metro area to who knows how far. Our talkback topic today is the film Witness Theater, which I trust everyone has viewed. I want to thank our sponsors for this film, Gunilla and Dan Kester, as well as our local Holocaust Resource Center. We are joined on Zoom by our hostess, Katie Zontek, wave, Cultural Arts Director for the Greater Buffalo Jewish Community Center, which is our primary sponsor. Also with us is Elizabeth Schramm, Director of our Holocaust Resource Center of Buffalo. Hello, Elizabeth. And also Hannah Slobodkin, an HRC college intern coming to us live from Pittsburgh, along with our panelists who will presently introduce themselves. The panel discussion will be led by Elizabeth and will conclude with a question and answer interaction. Participants may send their questions and comments through the live chat option throughout the discussion. And the panelists will do their best to respond during the question and answer. If you have a particular panelist you want to address your question to, please name them. Witness Theater is a unique program that was led by a drama therapist with high school students in Brooklyn. The aim was to sensitize age-appropriate students to the Holocaust by meeting and interacting with survivors who experienced it firsthand. This workshop culminated in the performance of a play based on the survivors' stories. The film that has emerged employs a mix of cinema verite, archival footage, interviews, animation, and staged recreations of stories to blend the past and the present, using the Witness Theater program as a vehicle for telling the survivors' remarkable stories. At this point, I'd like to now turn the talkback session over to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Schramm, and I'm the director of the Holocaust Resource Center, where we teach the lessons of the Holocaust. We remember the survivors and victims, and we promote social justice, civic responsibility, and human rights. So we chose to sponsor this film because we connected to it on such a deep level. So something we've thought a lot about is what are we going to do when survivors are no longer able to share their stories? So to address that, we've started a training program for the children and the grandchildren of survivors to join our speakers bureau and to go into schools and share their family stories. In addition, there's a part in the movie where the students and the survivors go to the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York City, and it's so powerful and beautiful. And in December, we took a community trip to the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and we had teachers, community members, and one survivor joined us, and it was really, really powerful. So I'm honored to be here tonight and to be moderating the panel. So let's hear from our panelists. I'm going to call on each of you to introduce yourself and then mention briefly how you're connected to the Holocaust Resource Center. So let's first start with Sofia Veper.
Hi, I'm a Holocaust survivor. I was born in Amsterdam, Holland, and I came to the United States in 1954. There was an Anne Frank exhibition at the Williamsville High School about 45 years ago about Anne Frank. And they needed some people, for docents, to explain all the panels. And I wrote a letter to Sylvia Schwartz. I said, perhaps you can use me because I'm a temporary of Anne Frank. And I'm billing, to be a docent. And she went bananas, oh my God, you went to the same school and everything else. And so I got involved. But I did not talk right away till we had a lunch 2 weeks later. She invited a lot of people. And I was in a school and I was a school teacher. I don't like school lunches. I said, oh my God. And there came a beautiful lunch, kosher and everything. And I knew that they wanted something from us. And what they wanted was, lecturing and talking about the Holocaust to school children. And that is how I really got acquainted with the Holocaust Resource Center and everything else. And I'm still talking after all those years. Not right now, because they close all the schools and the colleges, and I have a hard time about that. Right, Drew?
No, we are so thankful. Okay, and Lily, will you introduce yourself? Lily, I'm sorry, you're on mute.
Okay, hi, I'm Lily Winiger-Bink, and I'm going to follow in Sofia's footsteps and speak about my parents. I'm a second generation survivor. I came to because of my parents' story, I got in touch with the Holocaust Resource Center. They were born in Poland. It's now the Ukraine. They were incarcerated in the ghetto. They were in a slave labor camp, and they were in hiding for most of the war. They were the only survivors, and they were married before the war. They were the only survivors on both sides of their family. So they had that kind of loss, desperation and loss throughout the war. After liberation, they were in a displaced persons camp for 4 years and came to the United States and attempted to start a new life. Let me cough a minute. On a personal note, I worked at Buff State. I retired about 6 years ago. I worked for 40 years there in a program called the Educational Opportunity Program, EOP. It was a wonderful place to work. I helped underrepresented and first generation college students manage to get through college. And I felt like I was paying it forward, giving them support that my parents got or should have gotten when they got here. I have two grown children, 2 beautiful grandchildren, and I belong to Shir Shalom, and I'm happy to be on this panel. Thanks.
Thank you, Lily. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Nurit Fisher.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nurit Fisher. I was born and raised in Israel, and I moved to Buffalo in 2003. My grandparents were Transylvanian Holocaust survivors who moved to Israel after the war and started their new life. I have been connected to the HRC by getting the training a few years ago to tell my family story. And since then, I've been going to schools and lately also to multiple Zoom lectures to different age groups that are requiring now social distancing. So we've been working with that. And usually I'm talking about my Savta, about my grandmother and her experiences during the Holocaust and afterwards. Another level of work that I've been doing with the HRC is working closely when I conducted my studies about second generation experiences, loss and grief sentiments following the Holocaust. And although now I live in California, again, the Zoom and the social distancing allows me to continue and work. I work with Elizabeth on local and international projects, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Thank you. Okay, and Dr. Drew Kahn.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and hello, everybody. What an honor it is to be here and part of this really, really wonderful panel. It's an honor to be here. I am a professor at Buffalo State in the theater department, and I'm just finished my 26th year, so I'm just a baby compared to Lily. But I remember working with Lily and collaborating with her when she was leaving and I was just starting there. While I'm a professor in the theater department, most of my time is spent, I'm the founding director of the college's Anne Frank Project. And that is a social justice initiative of the college that started with a story, started with a play. And in 2006, my connection to the HRC really was cemented because I was directing a production of The Diary of Anne Frank with no intention of it becoming this project and this wonderful all-encompassing social justice initiative. And I knew that I wanted my cast of students to meet a survivor. So I called the Holocaust Resource Center, and one of the greatest things in my life happened is that I was introduced to Sofia Veper. And Sofia came and spoke to our cast, and she said something to me on the phone that was really, really important. She said, when I invited her, she said, I will come, but you will never get rid of me. And thankfully, she was right. And she not only came, we had her scheduled that evening to speak to the cast for 2 hours, and 4 hours later, everybody in tears and hugging Sofia, we realized something special was happening. And Sofia came to every rehearsal and every performance after that. We did a very unique thing with that production. We had 2 Anne Franks. We, of course, had the Jewish Anne Frank, but we also had a Rwandan Anne Frank, imagining herself in the midst of the Rwandan 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, making that comparison that there quite possibly is an Anne Frank in every genocide. And it really exploded into what is now the Anne Frank Project. My research is all about what you just saw. It's called devised theater, creating theater from the ground up to improve the world. You know, Anne Frank said a lot of wonderful things, but one of the things we hang our hat on at Buffalo State with the Anne Frank Project is, she says, how wonderful it is that we need not wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. And I tell my students every time I get in front of them, that moment is now. And I always say that there's no better time to be teaching social justice through story, but I think we can take the quotes and the italics off as we see in the midst of this global pandemic and this racial revolution, that we need stories more than ever. So I was really comforted, Elizabeth, to see that you chose this piece, because it really speaks to me, and it's really what we do with the Anne Frank Project. And I'm happy to share more about that as the evening moves forward. So thank you for having me.
Wonderful. No, it was really a no-brainer to have you and to have all of you. So thank you. Okay, so I'm going to ask the panelists a few questions, and then we'll get to the Q&A portion from the audience. So, Sofia, we're going to start with you. First of all, what was your overall impression of the film and of this project?
Well, excuse me. My first impression was that the one who made the film was very smart, that he did not interview the Holocaust survivors, that 8 in the movie, right, with older people, that he selected teenagers. And I like that, because they are the transformers. They are going to tell their legacy, you know, after we are not here any longer. Not only that, if you show that film in colleges and high schools, I was a teacher, so I always think about what to show the children. They can relate to it. Instead of 2 older people, one the interviewer, the other one the survivor, they say, that happened so many years ago. But here you have young people, teenagers, who interview the survivors. And so that is their legacy. That is the legacy. If we don't have that anymore, if we don't have the legacy, then about 30 years from now, nobody knows what the Holocaust was. They forget about it. It just falls in the dustbin, or they say it never happened. But here we have young people, and so when we show the films and everything else in schools and colleges, people can resonate to it and say, wow, you know, I like to be part of that. I like to be part of that and change the world and become an upstander.
Thank you. Yes. And what was the most powerful part of the film for you?
What I like most about it, that they selected young people, you know, to interview the older people. Personally, I'm a reader. I like words. I like languages. And everybody, even if everybody speaks English in the United States, they have their own way of of handling the language, you know what I mean? So when they interviewed when they interviewed the Holocaust survivors, that is exactly, and they were all born the same time as I was born. That was my language. Not that it was Dutch, but the way they expressed themselves. You know, I would have used the same words. I said, yeah, you know, that's the way it was. I would have expressed myself the same way. But also, what impressed me was, and one of the interviewers talked about it, he was surprised that these people who suffered so much were so strong and did so well in life. I'm not talking about financially, but otherwise. And so that was very nice. So no matter how bad you have in your life, you know, you have to make your own life and believe in hope. You know, you cannot just sit there and say, oh, poor me, you know. Somebody has to do grievance counseling. I hate that word, by the way. You know, you just have to talk to yourself and make your own life.
Thank you. And do you think, you know, how the students performed this play based on the survivor testimony, do you think that's an effective way to carry on the legacies of survivors?
Yes, I think so. And well, I hate to talk about the Drew, but remember the graduation at Buff State? There were 1,000 graduates at Buff State. And so the president, she named, oh, we honor this one, this one, and this one. And then she mentioned my name, but I really don't say it because I want to be famous or whatever, right? So there were 1,000 students there. And the moment she mentioned my name, okay, they hollered, they started applauding and everything. Not for me, I'm not rich, I'm not sexy, you know, I'm old, but a kind of a thank you, you know, Drew's program, the Anne Frank program, what we did. Thank you for doing that and making us aware of what went on and what we should do. And so, because I always thought, who listens to us, you know? But they did, didn't they, Drew?
Can I say something quickly, Elizabeth, because she's being so modest. So Sophia, you're going to be mad at me for sharing this, but this little graduation that she's talking about, Sophia was given the highest honor from the State University, the whole system. She received an honorary doctorate of arts and letters because of her commitment over the past 10 years to her work with the Anne Frank Project. And when I had the honor of walking her down the aisle in graduation, and the students know her because she has spent so many hours sharing her story with them and connecting to them. And they were saying, Sophie, they were taking selfies with her. And when they mentioned her name, it was a great moment because 5,000 people stood up immediately, like Mick Jagger was in the room, because of Sophia's impact and her story's impact. And I remember her telling me right after that graduation, Drew, they've been listening. They've been listening. And that connects back to the witness theater, right? That there were assumptions on both sides. The children had assumptions about the survivors. Survivors had assumptions about the young people. But then stories, one of the powerful things about stories is that stories erase assumptions. So we reconnect with each other. But so it wasn't just a little graduation. Sophia got an honorary doctorate. Just want to put that in. She's going to be.
But you know why I'm talking? That's what I really want to say. I'm talking because when they put us on the trains of what happened during the war, they always say, tell our stories before they were shipped to Auschwitz. Tell our stories so the world know what happened to us, so it can never happen again. Of course, we still have genocides and everything. So I tell their stories. Morally and ethically, I'm forced to tell their stories. I cannot stay quiet because I survived and I tell the stories.
Yes, and we're so thankful that you continue to do so. It really, every student I know is so affected once they hear your story. Okay, so Lily,
Mhm.
let's go to you. So yes, what were your overall impressions of the film and what was the most powerful part for you?
Well, I watched it twice, and the second time I gleaned so much more. I think because the first time I watched it on a small iPad, and the second time I had that Vimeo, is that how you say it, going? And on TV, it was just so much more impressive and moving. But what was so interesting to me was the survivors were saying, "Who wants to hear my stories? Nobody wants to hear them. I'm too old. They're going to think I'm crazy. I've never told anyone my stories." And the students, on the other hand, were nervous, were scared, were worried. But once they got together like that, week after week, they formed such a strong bond, and it was just amazing to see. It turned into excitement every week, and that was, they knew the stories, they knew the numbers, they knew the basics, but to hear the stories made such a connection. They're hugging and kissing. I love that. Visiting each other in their home. It was great. The part that was what was most powerful to me was I loved because the survivors were old, but they showed pictures of when they were young, and they showed their growing up. They had happy times. They had lives before. They were teenagers, just like these teenagers. And they were, what were some of those jobs? They were furriers and biologists, and they roller skated, and they were fishermen, ballet dancer. They had lives, and in a minute, those lives turned around, not in a minute, in a long, but they were just ordinary teenagers. And I think that made an impact on those students. And I loved hearing the accents because it sounded like my parents were talking. I loved the dialogue too. But is that a good, what was the question? Was that a good way to, I think it's such a great way to form those bonds, because you sit in an auditorium and you listen to someone speak, and that's good, or Zoom, or read a book, a fictional book, or watch a movie, but those connections are unbreakable. And they said, I love when they said, we're the witnesses now. If something happens to these survivors, God forbid, we'll be the witnesses now. And that was powerful to me.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Okay, and Nurit, let's hear from you about your impressions of the film and what was the most powerful part for you.
Thank you, Sophia and Lily, for sharing. I think overall the movie is very important and very meaningful. The fact that we can still make direct contact between the young generation and the survivors is priceless. And in the film, they're showing us not only contact and information, but also actually creating relationship. And the relationship are starting slowly and developing to the point. One of the points that I remember that shaked me is when the young people were debriefing in a young people session and started to be really worried about the age of the survivors, that actually what will happen if they will die, and the emotional cargo of that moment was really, really strong. And I think that the more younger people that we know today will know a survivor in person, will be able to connect a survivor in person, the better we are as society educating the next generations about what happened. And of course, will make them better ready for Holocaust denial and Holocaust distortion that we see lately more and more. One of the most powerful parts for me was the caring and tenderness the connection created. And I know it's not easy for young people to achieve a identification. And these two age groups that are so many years apart and experience the life so differently, the creators of the movie managed to do this connection, and they used wonderful tools. And one of the examples that stand out for me very strongly was the exercise of saying hello with your eyes only. It's one of the first exercises there. She lets them walk in a room, saying hello in the eyes. And maybe because of the COVID and the fact that we're all with masks today, and we should use our eyes much more than what we think, it was a beautiful way to begin to create the connection in a non-verbal way, showing them they don't need the words. In a way, actually, that all humans and creatures can connect without words, regardless of the language, of the accent, of the experience in life. and other differences. And again, today we can teach the lessons in a world that requires to wear the mask, and the more connections we can make with the eyes and the gaze and better awareness and perception of somebody else, better we are to express ourselves in that way. And in the whole movie, this creation of relationship is being done in a very, very sensitive way, and allowing eventually to the students to present the story after they created identification of what was happening, and creating the performance that we see in the end. And as a way to create the legacies of the survivors, of course, it's one way to continue these legacies. And the bridge that connects from generation to generation is being created here very, very carefully, as I said. And it made me to think of one of the quotes of the philosopher George Santayana, his aphorism, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And this was later used, of course, in multiple variations. One of the famous ones is Winston Churchill, that said that a nation that forgets its past has no future. We need to study the past in order to have a better future, and we need to be able to make it a better future for the next generations. And this project not only teaches the past, it manages to create identification and the connection with the past. And it's essential to us as a society in order to be able to learn and remember, so we have a future, and hopefully it will be a better future, and something like that will never happen.
Thank you. Those were such great points. Okay, now Drew, do you need me to repeat the questions, or do you think you have them, the overall impressions and the most powerful part? And then feel free to talk about the Anne Frank project and how it compares to what you saw in the film.
Yeah, I would hate to say that we compare, more that we contribute, and we're doing all the same thing. It felt very familiar to me. This is what we spend our time doing, my students and I, with the Anne Frank project, is taking those very difficult situations and those things that are often ignored in education, right? Stories are incredibly, and particularly the building and the process of building stories, are really, really important processing tools. You know, there are huge gaps in socio-emotional learning today, and we're wondering why our children are turning out this way, or how come they're coming out without this and that. And stories remind us of what it means to be human, and remind us of being kind, and remind us of how to share, and all those things that we used to think of citizenship, right? So to me, it felt very familiar. I was very gratified to see their work. I'm not a drama therapist, but to see it from the drama therapy instead of I'm an actor and a director, so from the theater perspective, we do the same thing. And those exercises that you were mentioning, Nurit, and the things that you saw, those are things that my students have the privilege of doing all the time, to understand that using our bodies and using our souls and using our spirits to tell stories and create stories together, it doesn't just help the situation we're working on, it makes us better people. And that was evident to me in the work. So when you watch the film, when I was watching the film, the thing that really excited me the most was the process. The process of getting to know each other. And you could see, if you kind of rewind quickly and you move through it, you'll see that their bodies became more engaged, the more comfortable they became with each other. They were being humanized with each other with this vehicle called story. I always tell my students, the product, the story is not important. The process is important. And the three things that we really hang our head on with the Anne Frank project is we're not trying to get a bunch of actors to be Hollywood stars or going to Broadway. We're training via the story building process and story-based learning, which we train teachers in. I want to talk about that too. Is that we're really teaching valuable lessons in three really important vacancies in Western education. Very important lessons in conflict resolution, community building, and identity exploration. Now, if you just look at what we're going through right now with Black Lives Matters, Think about that. Community building, conflict resolution, identity exploration. Identity is a huge, huge issue. Who am I? Whatever school we go to, and my students have written 14 plays now, original plays with workshops that we've traveled to well over 300 schools in Western New York. And we also train teachers in Rwanda. But no matter where we are, we always say the same thing. We look in those kids' faces and we say, you matter and your stories matter. We're here to help you tell your story, because if you don't, someone else will, and they're going to get it wrong. Stories have that potential to open us up, explore those issues with this little thin layer of fiction that we may not otherwise. So to me, it was very familiar to watch it, Elizabeth, and it was also gratifying to watch the results, but also really, really cool to watch how that physical relationship between the survivors and the young people, to watch that get more and more physically engaged. And to me, when two people are becoming more and more physically engaged, you're dropping that layer of protection and becoming vulnerable with each other, right? I mean, that's the definition of relationship. So by the end, right, they were hugging and kissing and couldn't imagine life without each other. So that's something as an educator, I really like to watch for. I like to watch that physical connection. In the beginning, when we go to schools, the kids are sitting down thinking they're going to be at a boring assembly. And by the end, they're hugging my students saying, don't leave. That's because my students are wonderful, but it's also because of the power of story. Oh, can I say one more thing too? Sofia mentioned legacy, and that's a really good name. So we're in our second year of a new program called Sofia's Legacy, named after Sofia Veper, where we are working with local teachers and educators to bring the power of story and the power of lessons from the Holocaust, lessons of comparative genocide into the classroom. I'm sure you already know this, Elizabeth, but maybe our audience doesn't. Nearly 70% of the United States K through 12 educated students do not know about the Holocaust. Well, that's a horrible reality, and we have to fill that need. So we've had really good success with Sofia being at Buff State, so we thought we'd tie it together in a permanent training program called Sofia's Legacy. So we're excited to do that in a couple weeks, the second year, and we will do that again and again and again, because those lessons from the Holocaust, those lessons from comparative genocides need to find their way into the classroom. Our kids want to talk about it. We just need to equip our teachers with those stories.
Definitely. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to hear from Nurit and Lily. So Nurit has completed the training process when, she's been speaking about her grandmother and her story, both to students and to adults, and it's been very well received. So first of all, Lily is now in the process of this training. So first of all, Nurit, why is it important to share the experiences of your grandmother?
So one of the things that I noticed during the years is that when you go to high schools, when you see young people in an audience of sometimes 30 and sometimes 300 people in front of you, they learn in the classroom the numbers, the history, the geography, the line of events, what happened and where. The important part that we can bring over is the personal perspective. It's the one story at the time, one person at the time, the personalization of the survivor and what happened to them in a way that connects to this audience. It's usually children, usually middle school and high school. And I saw during the years that the more personalized the story is, their questions afterwards are more personal. They want to know more of what happened to this person when they were my age, what happened to them later, what did they think, what did you think growing up with them and knowing them and so on. So the individual story here is what we can bring to the classroom that until now, the survivors did wonderfully, but there are less and less survivors that can come and hear these stories. We still new survivors. We're bringing them in their name. We're continuing that education in that perspective. And there are schools actually that after that talk send us additional questions that the children were thinking about, talked in the classroom, and wanted to know an additional layer or additional question. One other thing that I do try to make whenever I go is to connect it to what is going today in the world, and make the connection between our diverse society, our human rights and social justice issues, and what can happen to a society if things are not being taken care in a better way, educational way from the beginning. So that's something that I see also in Zoom, people are very interested in hearing that in our unfortunate situation, people want to hear more stories. People want to connect in that way as well.
That's great. No, thank you. And I was going to follow up and say, can you talk about how students have responded? But you answered that. It sounds like they're really interested and they just want to know more. Okay, and so Lily,
Yes.
why are you participating in the training, and why is it important for you to share the story of your parents?
Well, they never had the chance to do a Spielberg audio tape of their experience, and I spoke to my son-in-law's graduate school class, and I was astounded at how interested they were. I mean, I just told my parents' story, and they, as you say, Nurit, they asked so many questions afterwards. They were fascinated with what happened. They had a lot of questions, and I was gratified that they were that interested. They, the Holocaust, it's 9 letters, it's a word, and it's thrown around a lot. And now with the rise of, neo-Nazism and anti-Semitism and Holocaust deniers, and as you say, Drew, that, so many, 70% of the children in America don't know about anything about the Holocaust. It's my privilege and my honor and my duty, really, to tell their story. And, 2 years ago, my parents were from Poland, and which is now the Ukraine, the town that they're from. And I went there and I spoke to, I went with a group of descendants of survivors from that town. And we spoke to the Ukrainian teenagers who they didn't know there had been a Jewish person in that town. They didn't know anything about it. And I figure if I can tell my story to Ukrainian teenagers with a translator, I certainly can do it here in America. So I'm, and as the person in the teacher in the movie said, life is stories. If we don't tell them, they are lost forever. We have to leave a piece of ourselves behind. And I want them to hear a real story, as you say, Nurit, not fictionalized. There's so much good fiction out, but I want the real story out there to share with students. So I'm looking forward to it.
No, so yes, it's going to be great. So, and Lily, what do you, Nurit, go ahead.
To add to Lily that it's the one person and it's not fiction, and we can actually give something from the spirit and knowing the person one-to-one, because in some way we owe that to them, right? They were going through everything. I know that my grandmother, for example, many years didn't want to tell the story, and then started to tell it in bits and pieces. And I'm coming to the classroom and having an accent, so sometimes the kids are really, oh, she's coming somewhere there, and she knows people that maybe and experience that. I'm bringing the closest possible real thing to them, and in some way keeping the legacy, as was said here before. And we owe that to our families.
Yeah.
No, that's beautiful. And so, Lily, what do you want students or adults to gain from hearing your presentation?
As I said, I want them to know what it was like to go through what they went through, the unspeakable tragedy that they went through, and what it was like when they came to the United States to have to start all over again, and the courage that it took to do that, and the fortitude and the energy, and they didn't have any money, they didn't have the language, they didn't have a job, they had nothing, and they lost so much. And if they can do it, if they can get through it, and educate a couple daughters, and and build a house, and make a living, small living, but a living, then there's hope for other people too, in that sense. And I want them to know that there's hope and that there's, with courage and determination from what they went through, others can do that also, I guess. But I just want to share the story mostly.
No, that's great. Okay, so now I'm going to hand it over to HRC's wonderful intern, Hannah Slobodkin, to lead us in the question and answer portion.
Hello again. We encourage the audience to type questions for our panelists into the chat on YouTube. And as a reminder for our panelists, please raise your hand if you would like to respond to a question. Our first question is from Rob Goldberg. He wrote, "The group of teens in the film struck me as being particularly mature, articulate, and empathetic. Has that been your experience as well, or was this group unique?" Okay, I'll turn it over to Drew then.
I can tell you that we vastly underestimate the past two generations of young people. I think they're capable of much more than they're given credit for. In fact, I find this current generation to be remarkably mature. They've only experienced tragedy, right? They're born right around 9/11. And school shootings, and they've seen one atrocity after another. They've lived through a pandemic. I'm talking to you too, Hannah, right? You know that this is not a complaining generation. It's a ridiculously curious generation, and it's a generation, from my perspective, working with K through 12 and college. Like I said, the past 30 years, this generation I have great hope for this generation, because they're all about action, not about talking. I know my generation talked a lot, but I'm not sure we did a lot. And we're reaping the results of that right now. But this is a doing generation, and building stories and creating stories together is a perfect venue for this generation. So I wasn't surprised by their maturity, but I was pleased. It reminded me of the students we work with locally.
Amazing. Does anyone else want to respond to that question?
Yeah, I do. I was a teacher and I'm retired, and I lecture for many years now. And so the last couple of years, 3, 4, 5 years, this whole new generation, they're different than the other ones. They are very idealistic. They don't only do the talk, they also do the walk, do a lot of volunteering. And they are very aware what is going on, and they're trying to improve this community they live in. They try to be good citizens. So always said, if somehow the whole world could have that age level and the way they are, we would live in a paradise. We would live in a paradise. They are not so biased. They don't criticize. They don't have hate crimes, they don't care what colors somebody's skin is, nothing. They just want to know, can I click with that particular person? And they're very, very idealistic, and they're aware of it. They have to do something about it. My generation for sure doesn't do it. Their parents' generation doesn't do it. It is the young ones. It is the young ones. Is it my telephone here?
It might be. I think so, because other people are on mute, but I think we're okay now. I don't know if you want to continue, or we can move on to the next question, which is also for you. So this is from the audience. We saw that it took some time for the survivors to open up to the teens and share some parts of their story. What made you want to speak and share your story with students?
Well, I feel it is personally my obligation to speak, because during the war, when the worst part of the war, they always said before they were shipped, to Auschwitz, although they didn't know they were going to Auschwitz, tell our stories. That's all they said. Tell our stories so it will never happen again. So I perhaps it sounds funny or not right, I feel I am obliged, it is my duty to tell this story. I'm the spokesperson for these people. I tell their story. And I think I changed many people's mind, especially of the younger people. I'm telling this story, not only what happened exactly to them, did they get hurt, were they tortured? No. How could it happen? I always start my spiel when I talk to an audience. I say, it could happen in the most civilized country we had before the war, in Germany. They had the best of everything, the best hospitals, the best doctors, the best scientists, you name it, the best of everything. And they did it. They not only killed 6 million Jews, they killed 5 million other civilians. They did it. If it could happen there, then could it happen here? Could it happen in Switzerland or whatever? We have to be very careful, even here in the United States, especially the last couple of years. We have to be extremely careful.
Thank you. This next question is for the panel. What do you think the result would be if the project was done with teenagers that are not Jewish? Okay, Drew.
I'm only raising my hand because I work at Buffalo State and most of my students are not Jewish. So from a Jewish kid from LA, I see it all the time. I think it would, oppression is oppression. And while storytelling and the use of story is thankfully a very, very strong Jewish tradition, right? We've used the power of stories to continue to survive. It's in our blood, but it's not just in our blood. It's in we're wired for stories. Everybody's brain that's watching this right now, neuroscientists, evolutionary scientists will tell you that we are literally wired for stories. So you may find examples of this. Hannah, you're in college right now. If somebody is not presenting you a story that is entertaining to you, your brain will make another story to make it more entertaining, right? You can check your notes to see what stories you believe in and which stories the professor was selling you. But this idea of using stories as a vehicle for education is not new, but it's, I think, underused. And when 60%, 65% of my students are brown and black at Buffalo State, they don't say, I can't talk about this because it's a Jewish issue. They say, wait a minute, when they hear Sofia speaking, they say, wait a minute, that's me too. She suffered like I've suffered. And Sofia does a really, really amazing job of that too, about extending and connecting. And just like Nurit said, you have to connect it to today. Because if we just tell this Holocaust story as an isolated historic incident, then it releases the listener of responsibility. And something that Sofia is amazing at is making sure that everybody in the room is not just hearing about her story in World War II and the Holocaust, but also connecting it to today and to them. You can see the strings from Sofia to those kids' hearts. And you can see it afterwards when she's done talking, they just line up. They just want to be next to her because they didn't get enough story. And they want to say, me too, me too. So I've seen it, you don't have to be Jewish to understand oppression.
Nurit.
Following up on Drew, I've been talking in front of hundreds of children who are not Jewish, including all the religions and multiple origins and different places in the US. People connect to the human side of the story. And it doesn't matter if it's a Jewish person or not. Another thing that was very interesting for me is when I started to do my research about generational trauma, all these young people told me, oh, so you're doing it about the Native Americans? Oh, you're doing it about what happened to the Black people in America? Oh, everybody could identify. It's the human connection here. It's not the religion.
I think, sorry, also, Hannah, just one more thing. Because Buffalo is a refugee, immigrant, new American home for so many, thousands and thousands, to be in front of a school with refugees, new Americans, immigrants who have come from mostly from camps, right? Refugee camps, horrible situations. When Sofia speaks to them, it's like somebody finally understands them. She is saying their story. She's saying, they look at her and say, finally, somebody who has suffered the depths that I have, a shared story. I don't think there are too many things more important than shared story. And we're seeing that right now play out, right? Black Lives Matter. Our story matters too.
Absolutely.
No, there is so much hate sometimes. A lot of people are very anti-Semitic. If you really talk to them, they hardly ever met a Jew in their life. They never went to school with Jewish people. If they had, race problems, they have certain, but how did I start? The point is, they never really met a lot of Black people, Mexican people, Jewish people, Muslims, because they hear it see it in the paper, on television, and social media, all the bad things they do, etc., etc., etc. But they never met one person like that, one other person to person, so they can talk. And that is telling stories. Hey, this Muslim girl or whatever it is, she likes the same thing I do. Oh, you have a boy. Oh, I love to go to the Buffalo Bills, that suddenly they connect and they have that in common. And then often they will say, well, my best friend is Jewish, my best friend is Black or Mexican. However, we know the rest, the rest, because they don't know the rest. But they know that one person they like because they connect. They have a lot in common. They click together.
Thank you. I think that that's an excellent segue into our last question, which says, Claudine, the survivor from France, brings up the point that because the students have never gone through anything like this, they simply can't understand what it was like. And do you agree or disagree with this? And can the gap in experience be bridged in any way?
If you never experienced it, how can you experience the Holocaust or a genocide? You cannot do that. You don't know what it does to people if you are the victims. Even the victims cannot talk about it. So how can an outsider? What I do sometimes when I tell about that of the 11 million people, citizens the Germans killed, almost 2 million were children, almost 2 million. And I said, okay, sit down and think about it. Many of you have little brothers and sisters or nieces or cousins or whatsoever, or neighbors who have small children. You think about these children, okay? And then think about it, what was done to these children? What was done? So they can visualize it, what it means, instead of just saying, they killed so many people. Like when 9/11 happened and they flew in the World Trade Center, so many people got killed, you just could not comprehend it. You can 1 or 2 or 3 or perhaps 10. So every day in the New York Times, they had 2 pages with pictures of all the victims, and they told the names and where they were married, and they coached the football team of the kids, they made it personal. You saw a portrait of these people, of the real people, so you could connect with them. So when I talk many times, just put in your mind, or what happened to my grandparents. Think about your grandparents.
Hannah, I think that the question has the answer in it, because that the story becomes the shared humanity experience. Stories are not there to say, now you know what the Holocaust was like.
Mhm.
Stories are there to say, wait a minute, I now have been humanized because of the shared humanity in that experience. Like we don't love Harry Potter because we've wrestled a dragon too, right? But we've watched him, we've endured with him through these journeys, and we say, wow, me too. We didn't get upset when we saw the pictures of the Beirut bombing this morning because we've had an explosion in our home, but we know the aftermath of that situation because we too have been exposed to suffering. Stories are the bridge to shrink that gap that the question that the person who asked that question is there for. That's the exact reason why we use stories, to bring ourselves into the common experience, right? So if I start talking to you about the 1994 Rwanda genocide against the Tutsi, you don't need to have been there. You're going to hear a human being talk about that experience and say, wow, I felt loss. I've been scared before. I've been terrorized, and I've seen those experiences. We are the same. That gap, stories are there to shrink the gap. And once again, that's a primary Jewish strategy throughout the ages.
Thank you. At this point, I'll welcome back Katie.
Well, thank you, Hannah. And I just wanted to jump on as we end our event tonight and once again say thank you to everyone involved, especially our panelists. I can speak on behalf of our festival committee, saying that we were very grateful that you all agreed to participate and present this event through Zoom, as it was scheduled to be part of our live festival back in March. So when we decided to present virtually, we really felt it important to keep some of the extra events that we had planned, one of which was this, with having Witness Theater, such a powerful film, and having the Holocaust Resource Center here in Buffalo. The connection was natural. And so I think this was a really wonderful event to just continue the discussion and the conversation. Thank you guys for being such amazing educators and for all that you're doing throughout the communities. So appreciate it. I also just again want to thank our sponsors, the Holocaust Resource Center and Ganilla and Daniel Kester, as well as our cultural arts sponsors who are M&T Bank, the County of Erie, Town of Amherst, the Wolk Foundation, empowered by the Buffalo Jewish Federation. And just as a reminder, our virtual festival is running through August 21st. We have amazing films still left to be viewed. We have 2 more Tuesday talkbacks. Next week is in conjunction with the film Those Who Remained. And our following week is with The Spy Behind Home Plate. And on Monday, August 11th, I believe it is, Wednesday, August 11th, we're having a live holobake for one of our films as well. So lots of fun events still left to happen. You can find all the information on our festival website. And I think that concludes our evening. Thank you again all so much. And we hope to have you all joining us again. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you.